Good morning and welcome to my channel. It's good to have you here. I want to talk today about a woman's role in the household and what that means. I woke up this morning and thought, I haven't pissed anybody off today that I'm aware of. I probably have. I've got a lot of people in my home, so it's the chances that I've upset someone today are pretty high. But no, this isn't a topic that I'm really passionate about. I think it's really important, and so I just want to jump right into it. So the first thing is Christians are big on roles, on women's and men's roles. That's a real hot topic. If you're following this conversation, the term complementarianism is really popular. There's a lot of debate about what that means, what it doesn't mean. But the essential idea is husbands and wives, that their roles are different, but they're complementary, which, look, I've got no problem with that. But I think the underlying principle that we totally miss and makes this whole discussion about roles completely turns the whole discussion on its head is, what is the home? What is the household? What does it mean? Because if we don't understand what that is, then talking about the roles in that thing, it's like saying, you should know how to do your job as a manager. All managers are supposed to do X. Well, okay, a manager of what? A manager of a car wash, or a manager of a restaurant, or a manager of a, multi-million-dollar software as a service company, right? Those are all very different jobs. Same title, different job. So you have to understand what the underlying thing is that role is involved in, and that's the household. And I'd like to start there. And this is a topic I'll talk a ton about. I've already mentioned it in another video, and this will probably go in the playlist, household playlist, because this concept of the household is really important. And I think it's kind of one of those pivotal topics that we need to get right in this generation if we're going to make any progress. So let's start there. Well, let me back up about marriage, okay? Because we're talking about the woman's role, right? And so, what is marriage, and what is the Christian view of marriage versus the world's view of marriage? The thing I'd say is, I think the world's view of marriage, obviously, showing my cards here, I think it's terrible. I think it sucks. It's so unromantic, unsexy, joyless, selfish. And I'll stop there, but I could go on. It's sad. It's a sad view of marriage. The world's view of marriage is 1 + 1 = 2, 2 ones, right? One person and another person get together and they become technically a unit of some sort, but it's a team, and they're still both two separate people doing their own thing. The Christian view of marriage is 1 + 1 = 1. Two individuals sort of lose their identity as individuals and become one. They become one flesh. They're a new entity, a new household. And so this is one of the reasons, among others, that I'm a big fan of people getting married early, because this narrative that you need to find yourself, and you need to establish yourself and your career and your vision, your direction, and all this stuff. It's like you becoming more and more and more an individual, an autonomous individual with your own direction, and the likelihood that you're going to find somebody who's going to come right alongside you and be going in the exact same direction becomes more and more difficult, more and more unlikely the longer that you kind of pursue that your own sort of vision of who you are and what you're going to be. Where when you get married young, from day one, you guys are a team, you're a partnership, and you're in it together. So Christian view of marriage, and the reason why, the other thing about marriage, is that Christ says that marriage, the New Testament talks a lot about how marriage is this fundamental, super important image of God and of Christ and His church. It's a really big deal. It's a deep mystery. But God's imbued marriage with a lot of symbolic importance. It's another reason, if you're not a Christian and you're like, why do Christians freak out so much about gay marriage? This is why. The image of a husband and a wife, a man and a woman becoming one flesh, and creating a household. This is actually a really central, significant concept, and we believe it's something that God created at the very beginning of the Bible, and the whole thing is built on this idea. And when you start redefining these terms, these are religious terms, and you've got people who don't give two rips about religion or the institution of marriage from a religious view, who insist on using our words. We have to use your words. We want to use those words. We want to apply your religious words to what we're doing. It's like, no, just get your own words. Get your own words. I don't really care what happens on a tax level. I just don't want to. I don't want to redefine the English language because it's significant. So anyway, that's a whole different conversation, not what this video is about. So coming back to marriage and the Christian view, the other thing about marriage and the Christian view is we serve a triune God, a Trinitarian God. So unlike, let's say, Islam, the Christian view of God is that God is one, but he is also three. He's three persons in one. And so there is both unity and there's diversity. So the idea in the Christian worldview that people are different, that husbands and wives are different, is baked into our view of who God is. We don't think it's a bad thing for people to be different because our God is different. In other religions, God is one, and he needs to be conformed to perfectly. And because women are not like God, because their God identifies as himself as a man, then they are automatically not as like God as they could be. And so anyway, that's a little bit about marriage and the Christian view and why this matters. So just to upset people, let me quote some scripture. So 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 14 talks. He's actually speaking to young widows, but it has to do with marriage. He says, "So I would have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander." He's talking about a young woman who's lost her husband, and the question is like, what should she do? Should she remarry or shouldn't she? And he's basically saying, yeah, she should totally marry. She's a young woman, and she should have kids, and she should manage their household. And so let's talk about the household. Let's just kind of back up a little bit and talk about the household. What is the household? What isn't the household? Our modern view of the household has been so truncated and so minimalized that we think of it as like the four walls where you go to sleep. And so when we think of career and when we think of marriage and we think of the household, those are for most people, three completely different things. And what I'd like to posit here is that they're actually totally connected. One where one ends and the other begins is almost indistinguishable. These three things: career, marriage, household, they're all intertwined. And this is part of the problem of this view of marriage being 1 + 1 = 2, that kind of go together and but are still separate. When you get married, you are forming this covenant bond. You are forming this new institution, this new empire, this new household, this new kingdom. And husband and wife are 50% owners in this thing. They're equal partners in this thing that is their household, their kingdom, their empire. And so the idea that that your career is some separate thing and we should go off and pursue our career as if it's not part of marriage is a really problematic thing. There becomes this tension between marriage and career that shouldn't be there. And just to back up on that a little bit, I think a lot of this, our bad understanding of the household has come about. One obvious example to me is with the Industrial Revolution, turn of the century. Prior to that, most households were agrarian. Husband, wife, family owned a farm. They inherited it probably, and they worked it with their kids. and it was a family business. And yeah, you weren't, super wealthy, didn't have tons of luxury and access to, supermarkets and all the rest. But your family was a unit and had a job. And the center of your life happened right there on the farm with the family. The Industrial Revolution came along. Dad, in most cases, left the home to go pull a lever in a factory all day. Pretty soulless work, although somehow that it felt like, well, now the important stuff's happening outside of the home. That's where the money's being made. Drinking, gambling, and alcoholism became a huge problem when men left the household and started going into the factory to pull a lever all day. Shocker. Had money, had time, weren't really physically tired in the same way, weren't very intellectually stimulated, and it's just a problem. Mom, meanwhile, is at home, and her job now no longer has anything to do with the productive enterprise of making a living for the family. It's now just exclusively about the children, which in and of itself isn't bad, and that's an important part of a mother's job. But not long after that, we have public schooling and this idea that, well, we're going to ship the kids off too. They're going to leave the house every day, and they're going to go do something important where they're going to learn and be shaped and molded into good citizens and prepared for life, and their job pulling a lever in a factory someday. And so now mom's at home. She's no longer involved in producing anything for the market in the way of farming or whatever. And she's no longer educating her children. She's doing what, right? She's polishing the china, making herself look nice. What does that involve, right? And so I'm very sympathetic to the fact that view of a woman's role, because there's a lot of Christians today who are like, well, a woman's role is in the home. Her orientation's towards the house. Hey, I agree. But if that's your view of what the house is, if that's your view of what the home is, then that sucks. Like, that's not what she should be oriented towards, is just being in that place all day and not doing anything else. As a matter of fact, I think that's soul sucking. That's just as soul sucking as the dad who goes off and pulls a lever in a factory. That's not a calling. And I'm not, again, if you worked in a factory, I'm not dogging you. I'm just saying, I think most people who pull a lever in a factory all day would say, I hope to do something more than this someday. I hope that my kids can do something more than this someday. And so I think that the household is actually the way out. I think it's the way forward. And so So coming back to like career, okay, it's no wonder that a woman in that environment goes, I want to get out and do something meaningful too, right? My kids are out doing something, my husband's out doing something. I'm going to go do something. I'm going to jump into the marketplace and make money, because I guess that's the thing that's most important. And I'm not doing anything worthwhile here, it seems, after I get my chores done, And so the sad thing is that she, in most cases, and this is true today, is leaving the household, this institution, this kingdom. She's basically saying, I'm going to divest myself of any role or responsibility there, and I'm going to go become a 0% owner in some other man's, usually, empire. I'm going to go sign on with some other man's household, some other man's empire, some other man's business, and I'm going to work basically as a slave. I'm not even going to own any equity in the enterprise, and that's more meaningful than me building the kingdom that I already have 50% equity ownership of. And so she goes off and does that. Husband goes off and does that. They both bring home some money, but they're living their lives totally separately. Their kids are totally separate, etc. And there's no inheritance that's built up there. There's some cash potentially in the bank, but there's nothing to hand off to the kids. There's nothing that the kids have grown up learning how to do and be involved in. And so I think that this is when we talk about the role of a woman and her place in the home, I think the first place to look, now that we sort of have maybe a context for a different view of the house, of the household, of the home, And by the way, that word household in the Greek is oikos, and household management is oikonomikos. Does that sound familiar? Economy, economics. This is the same word. So the household was the center of economic production and activity, and it's been completely divested of that as well. And that's now the household, or the economy, is what happens out in the marketplace, and that's definitely not inside the home. But let's look at Proverbs 31. And this is the famous passage about the virtuous woman. And I'll start in verse 10. It says, "Who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants, and considers a field and buys it. From her profits she plants a vineyard. She perceives that her merchandise is good. She extends her hand to the poor. She reaches out her hands to the needy. Her husband is known in the gates, where he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies sashes for the merchants. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Charm is deceitful and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates." Okay, so long passage there, but that's the famous Proverbs 31 verse. When I taught some of this at my church, and one of the things before I read that, I asked, okay, everyone, just real quick, lightning round, give me, when I talk about the role of a husband, give me some answers. And like real quick, everyone said, making money, disciplining the kids, training the kids, whatever. And then I said, great, okay, now give me the duties of mom. It's like, well, the housework, the chores, submitting and trusting her husband, blah, 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 right? And it was like, okay. And I was like, okay, so let's go through Proverbs 31. I didn't hear anybody talk about her having employees. Verse 15, it says that she's got maidservants. So why didn't anybody say anything about, managing the employees in the home? Oh, that's interesting. It says that she brings food from afar. She rises while it's yet night. It talks about how she considers a field and buys it. So she's doing real estate deals. Nobody said, a woman's role is doing real estate deals. Okay, on behalf of the household. Interesting. It talks about how she sees that her merchandise is good. So she's producing products and she's taking them to the market. Nobody mentioned that. She plants a vineyard. So she's got a side hustle. She's got several side hustles. It looks like she's doing real estate. She's got merchandise. She's also taking her profits. It says from her profits she plants a vineyard. So she takes the money from one line of business, one service line of the household, and she invests it in opening a new service line, a vineyard. We're going to start selling wine. It talks about how she extends her hand to the poor. So this woman's involved in charity and philanthropy. Nobody mentioned that. When I asked about a woman's role in the household, nobody said charity, philanthropy. It says she reached out her hand to the needy. And then it says her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders in the land. So something about the way that she's managing and running the household gives her husband, A, a good reputation in the community, and B, the time to be able to go play a prominent role in the city government. So nobody mentioned that. Nobody said she is sort of equipping and enabling her husband to be more involved in government, which, by the way, she's telling him, hey, these property taxes are killing me. Go hash this out on the city council and see if we can get some movement on this. This sucks. Or she's involved in charity and going, we got a homelessness problem in our city, and here's where I think the problems are. Let's get this under control. Do your part, husband, in government, right? Um, so, there's more here. I mean, she's making linen garments and selling more products. So I'll stop there though and just say that vision of a wife and of a household, I think, is pretty profound and powerful. And I don't, unfortunately, know very many women who look like this. Really wonderful, godly Christian women who really want to obey what Scripture says about their role in marriage and in the household, but who, for some reason, have never been taught that this is it, right? That this is what household management looks like. So when I think about my wife and her role, if I were to give her a title, it is household executive. She runs this operation, and and it's a 100% partnership. But I entrust her with that job and responsibility, and I couldn't do it without her. And that's it's a team effort. The other thing I'd say, in the same way, she is very involved in my business. So, and in my career from day one, we've been talking about what is the career plan, what's the career trajectory, what's the next move. And it's never been, hey, I'm really passionate about X and I'm going to pursue this, and good luck with whatever it is you want to do. It's always been, what are we doing next? What is our next move? Is this place we're at currently the right spot? How should I be thinking about the future of this job? So I think husbands who aren't involving their wives in their career and in their career decisions, it doesn't mean that your wife has got to be, sitting there checking off and approving every decision you make in your job, or in the know about every single thing you're doing. That would be tedious, especially if she's as busy as I think she ought to be. But absolutely, you're trying to build an empire together, a kingdom together, that you're going to hopefully train your kids up into and hand off to your kids. Retirement looks like your kids taking over your business and running it, and you fading back into the background. You still have equity in it. It's still your business, still your thing, but it's you're sort of handing it off to the next generation. So anyway, a lot of stuff there. I know I covered a lot, probably covered too much for one video, but I wanted to kind of focus again on the role of a woman, her place in the home, and I hope that this challenged maybe your understanding a little bit of what Scripture means when it talks about this, and I hope it gives you a little bit of a vision maybe for what you should be doing. I think it's a shame that our houses are divided and that husband and wife, neither husband nor wife, are working in the home or working or even thinking about this idea of building up their household and building up an empire that they hand off to their children, something that's multi-generational. I think that's a huge tragedy. I think it's, and this is true on so many levels, but this is basic Sun Tzu kind of art of war stuff. If you want to defeat an enemy, if you can divide them, all the better, to divide them and take them one at a time. And we've seen that in Christendom in general, with all the proliferation of denominations and the little, narrowing of the different sects, and schisms within the church. It's just I think, the enemy's strategy for dividing us and making us impotent, and I think the same is true in the household. I think husband, wife, kids, they're all going in different directions. When you're a 16-year-old young man, all you're thinking about is how soon, like, what am I going to do when I get out of here? I want to get out of here. I can't wait. It's going to be great. And I'm going to go do my own thing. But it's like, you're going to do your own thing and just repeat the same cycle of creating a household that your kids don't want to live in, creating a household where your wife doesn't find any satisfaction or joy or purpose in the home, in the household, and so she's going out to go do something else. So anyway, I've had some really cool conversations with friends about this stuff. have challenged them to maybe, quit their job or become a contractor and bring their work home. COVID has actually been great because it's forced a lot of people back into their homes with both homeschool and kind of remote work. And I think a lot of people like it, or at least have kind of found that there's some interesting synergy between their husband and wife and the time that they get to be together and work together and brainstorm and get stuff done. I had a friend who's got a wife who's really talented at pottery, and it was like a hobby, and he was showing me some of her stuff, and it was like, dude, this stuff is awesome. Like, this stuff is, people would pay top dollars. Like, oh yeah, no, people like always try to offer a ton of money. I'm like, why in the world would you not invest in that? Like, take some of your money, that you're making and spending on stupid crap, and invest in your wife's business. She's crushing it. Like, you realize that she may be able to earn more money, your household produce more money with that than you can with your stupid, engineering job. And it's like, oh, didn't think about that. Yeah, good idea. And so, women, I hope that this feels like a challenge to step it up and look at and ask yourself, is going and being a marketing assistant, where you're sending emails and making PDFs or whatever this, whatever the job is that you're doing for some other man in a business that you have no future in, that you have no equity in, you're just getting paid a wage. Is that more inspiring than pursuing your talents and your gifts and building an empire with your life partner and your children who are your future? Which of those seems more valuable and worthwhile? And the final thing I'll say is, one of the warnings about this is that I see around me a lot of older women who are kind of empty nesters who get into a lot of trouble, because they've got too much time on their hands. They haven't spent their early years, 20s, 30s, 40s, perhaps, building this empire. And when all the kids leave and the kids are off pursuing their careers, kind of following this pattern, and husband's off doing his thing, they find themselves without a lot to do, and it's depressing. And the temptation is to either just be depressed and sad and wish that you had something to do. The other temptation is to become a busybody and start getting into trouble and gossiping and meddling in other people's business. Or sometimes you get, this idle hands, ripping apart their own home, where it's like, I got nothing to do, so I'm just going to sit here and kind of pick at my family. And all of it, is bad. And so, we want to sleep well at night because we've been working our tails off all day. And that's not a bug. There was work before the fall. And work is part of work together with your wife in the garden that God's given you. This is the picture of heaven. This is the picture of paradise, is working together with your life partner, being fruitful and multiplying and taking dominion. So hope that's helpful. Long video today, almost 30 minutes. Gosh, sorry. I hope this doesn't just crush my viewers. Thanks for listening, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.